Serious, what's the creepiest, scariest thing that you've seen but no one believes you? We actually have a word for this in Norway. It's called verger and is, in folklore, a spirit that walks just before the person it's connected to. Sometimes it can be heard or seen before the actual person gets there. It is supposed to be a good and helping spirit, sort of a guardian angel, that will let people know you are coming or warn you of dangers ahead. I had a similar experience when I was 13 to 14 years old in Arizona. We were heading down to Flagstaff to visit family, and as we drove at night I swore I saw some sort of dog running beside the vehicle. I didn't really pay attention to it at first, but then I looked at my dad and saw the speedometer reading 85. I looked back out and the figure broke off from the vehicle and headed out into the desert. I told my parents about it and they said that's impossible and that I was just having a bad dream.
Hey guys, much like you, I love reading people's stories on Ask Reddit. Unfortunately, there's a lot of weird middle school level, just thought experiment type hypotheticals like nice try Baskin Robbins. I don't find this compelling, so that's why I've made it my mission to trawl and crawl through Ask Reddit and find the very best content and put it in your ears. That's why I'm begging you, like and subscribe. If there's anything I can do to help you out, give you the kind of content that you crave to help you get through your workday, let me know in a comment, but please like and subscribe.
When I was 9, my father passed away and said goodbye to me in his own manner as well. Woke up randomly in the middle of the night to see him sitting at the end of my bed. He had died just 4 days prior. He didn't say a thing, just reached out and put his hand on my leg in a comforting manner. I screamed and left the room crying because it scared me quite badly, but I remember it as clear as if it had happened yesterday. Over the years I've come to terms with the fact that he was saying goodbye and feel much more at peace with his sudden death. My sister saw something on several occasions throughout our lives. I never actually saw anything, only heard something extremely vividly. Basically, one night everything was happening like usual. My mom was out with her friends watching some game, and my dad was watching a movie with my sister and I. It was a comedy, so we all went to bed laughing about it. I was lying in bed about half an hour after we were tucked in, reading a book. I heard somebody stomping down the hallway downstairs, and then full on sprinting up the stairs. I figured it was just my sister coming back from getting a drink or something, but I would have seen her leave her room because our doors are right beside each other, and the staircase is just around the corner. So then I figured it was just my mom coming back home and for some reason being extremely loud. The way my door is angled lets me see anybody who comes up the stairs, so I was watching and waiting as they seemed to be in quite a hurry. The footsteps were getting higher and higher up the stairs, but as soon as they got to the top, they completely stopped. There was nothing. My eyes were still totally fixed on the hallway as I got up to check who it was. I turned the corner and there was nobody. I immediately got covered head to toe with goosebumps, and tried to piece together what could have happened. Not even 2 seconds later I hear my sister screaming and she comes bolting out of her room with complete terror on her face. Without hesitating we run into our dad's room, where he is already standing up and asking what's wrong. My sister points back to her room crying, and says there's a man. My dad rushes into the hall, turns the light on, and then turns the light on in her room. He checks the closet and behind everything but doesn't find anything. Then he walks into my room and does the same, but still finds nothing. We spent the next 15 or so minutes holding his hand as he searched the rest of the house, flicking every single light on. He calls my mom to see if she had been home, but she says she's still with her friends. I could even hear the loud bar atmosphere through the phone speaker. We all slept in my dad's room that night. Over the course of the next 7 or so years, my sister had run out of her room crying about the same man in her room. She says he just stands there in the corner and watches her. She described him as a very tall man in a top hat and a trench coat, like a detective, she said. Everything completely black. It was a couple years after that I stumble upon what's known as the top hat demon, or the phantom hat man. It turns out it's an actual phenomenon. Every description and drawing is exactly what she described that day. I was peeing in the woods while camping and a huge dragonfly landed on my thigh. Body as long as my thigh, black and red, definitely a dragonfly and not a tarantula hawk or something. When I try to tell people, they say I must be exaggerating or misremembering. In addition to me exaggerating or misremembering, people also say it must have been 2 dragonflies fucking, but I've seen dragonflies fucking. This is going to be the millionth time I've said proportionately thick when talking about this incident, but the body was proportionately thick. It wasn't just longer. See what I mean when I say nobody believes me? I remember something exactly like this when I was younger. Ears started ringing, The room seemed to expand and lengthen by triple its size, but if I focused I could see the textures on the wall like I was 6 inches from it. Lasted a few minutes and really creeped me out. I was too young and scared to explain it to an adult. I have never talked about it or heard of it since. After 30 years I now have a frame of reference. Thank you Reddit. I was in the Persian Gulf on the now decommissioned ship USS Nassau, LHA-4, working mids and performing a weather observation sometime between 2 to 4 a.m. I saw multiple lights begin to move through the sky faster than any I've ever seen before. Back and forth, almost too fast to track with my eyes, too fast to be an airplane, too fast to be a shooting star. Then, suddenly, they came to center on the horizon, vibrated for a few seconds, and shot out of eyesight up into the sky. Still the weirdest thing I've ever seen. One time I had a nightmare where I was somehow brutally murdered. This was really long time ago and it was a dream anyhow, so I don't remember details, but it ended up in the bathroom where I bled out over the sink. In the morning I went to the same bathroom to casually take a piss. The sink was covered in dried up blood. I've rationalized that I must have had a really bad nosebleed or whatever during the night and just don't remember it. Drove for about 2 hours through rural Arizona with my fiancée late one night. I drove past a car stopped on the side of the road. It had its hazard lights on and hood was up. There was a dim light hanging from the hood, as if someone had been checking the engine. About a quarter mile down the road, my headlights illuminated a man standing on the side of the road. He was quite tall, over 6 feet, and very thin. He was ghostly pale, and bald. To me, the most unsettling thing was that he was just standing on the shoulder, in the pitch black, staring into the desert away from the road. There was no light except for the few cars passing by. He was just staring into the blackness of the desert. Not supernatural or anything I'm sure, but it sent shivers throughout my body. My fiancée was asleep almost the entire 2-hour drive, so she didn't see any of this, and she doesn't really believe it happened. I was home alone one day when I was around 10 and was in my room I shared with my brother. We had bunk beds and I was laying on the top bunk when the bed started shaking pretty hard for a good 5 to 10 seconds. I was terrified, but gathered the courage to look down under my bunk at the bottom bunk and there was nothing there. I jumped down and noped the hell out of my house and waited on the porch until my parents got home. When I told them what happened, they didn't really think anything of it and thought I was just making it up. I don't care what anyone says, that shit happened. I remember it clear as day still 20 years later.
This year, like I said, I'm having a midlife crisis. I've started a YouTube channel and I'm on a big health kick. One thing that I found is very easy to eat, very easy to prepare, is I heat up chickpeas with chicken broth and tikka masala. And there are two schools of thought about how you should eat beans. Some people believe you should buy the dry beans and soak them, but I tried that and it was a disaster. So I buy canned beans every time. And if I'm opening like 2 cans a day to be on this diet, it is a massive pain in the ass if the can has this jagged metal edge. You know, I'm worried if like little bits of metal are getting into my food and going to slice up my intestines. So I found this special can opener that actually opens the can in a way that is completely safe, no metal's getting in your food, and is 1,000 times better than any other can opener I've ever used. So if you wind up, opening a lot of cans for whatever reason, maybe you've got a cat or something, you must buy this can opener from my affiliate link.
I was once walking to my school bus stop, near my then girlfriend's house. Out of the corner of my eye I thought I saw a big dog. It startled me and I jumped back to find nothing there. Then my phone rang, girlfriend called me asking where I was. I had missed the bus. Lost about 20 minutes just getting spooked by a dog that wasn't there. I can't tell whether they said that because they didn't believe you, or were saying that to make sure you hushed up about the murder you just witnessed. You didn't see that and it never happened. Understand? Like, it would be a real downer on a trip to Disneyland, for sure. I was about 4 years old, visiting my great-grandmother in NJ. She made a bed for me that sleep on in the living room. I fell asleep easily, but at some point I woke up and saw my great-grandfather. He sat on the edge of my bed, smiled, patted my leg and got up. He put his jacket on and walked out the front door. He had been dead for longer than I had been alive and I had never met him. Adults the next morning all laughed at the silly kid with a big imagination. At Grandma's request I described exactly what he was wearing: flannel shirt, suspenders, khaki pants. Generic description of any grandpa for the last 100 years. Everyone was still giggling at my cute story. But when I got up to show her how he snatched his jacket from the hook by the door and slung it on in one motion, I turned around smiling only to see her completely pale-faced with tears running down her cheeks. Everyone got really quiet, and we never talked about it again. She knew I had seen him. No one else's opinion matters. Quite quiet indeed. I used to be a designated marksman in the army, and we often performed training exercises in woods with a lot of hikers and dog owners taking a walk. One time me and my spotter were tasked with performing recon on a dirt road and record the people moving there. We were both in ghillie suits and a camo paint to make our faces as featureless as possible. Here's an example of what it might look like. We see someone walking their dog without a leash, and the dog must have picked up our scent, because it bolted towards us barking. It stops a few meters short and the owner stands next to it and goes, "What is it? What do you see?" I just could not do something, so I sat up a little from our prone position and gesticulated the shush motion with my finger over my lips. The poor dog owner just picked up the little dog and ran like their life depended on it in the direction they just came from. That's probably one of my favorite memories from any exercise, and I'm sure you were his favorite memory. I had a similar experience. My family and I were sat at the dining table waiting for my dad to come down the stairs to eat. I heard his door shut upstairs, and the sound of his heavy footsteps come down the stairs, thunk 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 thunk. Just as he should have entered the door to the dining room, my brother and I both turned our heads to greet him as he came in the room, but he didn't appear. We looked at each other like WTF? Then, a couple minutes later, our dad came down the stairs and came in the room. I'd if this was a glitch in the Matrix or what, but I'm so glad my brother heard it too. I have a few, but the one that sticks out in my mind is a man I met. I was still in high school at this point and had to walk to the grocery store down the street from my house. As I'm about 150 feet from the doors, I pass a man that clearly didn't have a fashion sense. He was wearing a jean jacket with no shirt and what looked to be homemade leather pants. I stared for a moment and he stopped and looked back at me. He then said, "Do not let the tall men tell you that I was not here." Then he just walked away. I shrugged it off at the time, but I still think about it here and there. Once gave a hippie-looking guy an old pack of cigarettes I had. It had 3 left in it and I had another pack on me. I was a teenager and in my own world. Well, I was hanging out with friends and had forgotten him, and at the end when we all packed in to go home we heard this growl, so we moved faster and peeled the fuck out of there. This hippie mofo had taken off from across the parking lot and was nearly keeping pace with us as we hit the main road and kept on it for a good couple of blocks before he gave up. We were freaking out. Turns out I had left a fully charged phone card in the pack of cigarettes to call my friends out of state, and he was just being a bro. I found this out later, of course, when I calmed down and tried to find it. I was both sad and ashamed, one because my parents were a bit strict about the phone cards and also because he had run so much just to do a nice thing and we were scared of him. So I'm sorry, hippie dude. I still think of you. Also, I realize it's not really related to your story, but you just reminded me of the ordeal again. This sounds like you had a seizure. Seeing flashing lights can be called an aura, usually related to migraines, but can also be a seizure symptom. Here's the wiki definition. Aura symptom. An aura is a perceptual disturbance experienced by some with migraines or seizures. The aura stage preempts a seizure with epilepsy but can happen at any stage of a migraine. It often manifests as the perception of a strange light, an unpleasant smell, or confusing thoughts or experiences. To clarify, it looks like you had a seizure, then took a long-ass nap due to the exhaustion. Did you wake up after with a severe headache, muscle exhaustion and/or generally feeling awful all over? Depending on how long ago this was, and if you've experienced anything like this since, I'd recommend that you speak to a health professional and make sure that there's nothing serious going on. Source: am health professional. So I travel a lot to remote locations for work, oil and gas in Texas, and the roads to our work sites are often long, unlit dirt roads. When working near the Mexican-Texas border, we are told to never stop if there are peoples blocking these roads. If anything, we should speed up and do our best to avoid contact, but if unable to do so, we are supposed to whatever it takes to keep moving. NVM. Edited wrong post. This is why you don't stop link. Myself, wife and kids were driving near some cliffs near where we live. We stopped to take in the view and some photos. I lined the kids up with the cliff drop and ocean behind them and took some pics. As they took a step back for me to get a better picture, they fell off the edge of the cliff. I woke up sweating and petrified. The nightmare felt so real, one of those that really stick with you. I went for a pee and checked in on all the kids, all fast asleep in bed, apart from my youngest 5-year-old daughter. She was on the floor. She had fallen out of bed but somehow was still sleeping. Next to her on the floor, knocked over I assume when she fell, was a bedside lamp. The bulb from the lamp had burnt, was singeing into the carpet, I think ready to burst into flames.
Do you have any idea how convenient it is to use a Keurig machine for brewing coffee or tea? Personally, I gave up coffee a long time ago, but I was able to get a great, delicious cup of coffee in just seconds with no cleanup, no extra work, using a Keurig machine and a K-cup. And now I use my Keurig machine to brew tea, loose leaf tea, every day that I drink. And I also use it to make oatmeal and, anything else that you can put hot water into. So if you don't have a Keurig machine in your house, you're missing out. Try my affiliate link below in the description of the video, and you too can enjoy a great cup of coffee in seconds, any time of day.
I lived in an old house in a small town growing up, and there were quite a few strange things that happened while my family was there. The first thing I remember being creepy about that place is waking up in the middle of the night when I was 6 years old having to pee really bad. I climbed down from the top of the bunk bed and turned to see an old man in a rocking chair sitting by the door. I tried to wake my sister up in the bottom bunk, but she wouldn't wake up, and I remember her being almost like dead weight. I gathered up the courage to run by the man and out the door and fell asleep in the bathroom with the light on and got in trouble with my mom in the morning. My dad also told us that he thought there was something wrong with the place because he kept hearing kids playing and laughing when he would get ready for work in the morning. He woke up around 4 a.m. for work and would leave at 5:30. He told my mom that he heard laughing around the corner of the kitchen in the hallway one morning and went to see if it was one of us kids. Once he turned to the hall, he saw a glimpse of someone running around the far corner to the living room. He followed this kid running until he was back to the kitchen. When he checked our rooms, we were all sound asleep. My mom also said that she would sometimes see someone staring at her out of the corner of her eye if she was alone. Knowing all of this, when we were older, we would try to scare our friends that came over. One day my friend brought her Furby, this was the late 90s, and we were playing with it in the bedroom. It started acting weird, sounding fucked up like the batteries were draining. It shut off with its eyes closed and wouldn't respond anymore. I said to my friend that we had batteries downstairs we could get. As we were leaving the room with the Furby in hand, it suddenly popped its eyes open and said, "Hee hee, I tricked you," and we just screamed and dropped it lol. That wasn't the only weird thing with a toy that happened. My mom always told people a story about a toy I had as a baby as well. It was one of those toys that talked when you pressed its hand and said things like "I love you" and "let's be friends." One night I was sleeping and the toy kept going off and repeating "I love you, I love you." My mom thought it was glitching and went to remove the batteries, but when she opened the back there was nothing inside. She ended up throwing that toy in the garbage. There were a few other weird things that happened there, and I will always believe that house was incredibly haunted. I was working at a bakery on third shift, 8 p.m. to 4 a.m., at the local orchard. The store closed at 8, but it wasn't unheard of for the owners to come in after closing. I had been working there for about a week at this point. I was out stocking the shelves, so it was close to the end of our shift, so probably 3 a.m.-ish. I turned to take something off of the rack and there was a man standing by the cold case. He was late 40s, early 50s, bald, thin, average build, wearing a red flannel shirt tucked into jeans. He said, "Hello, how are you?" I said, "Hi. I'm doing well, how are you?" He said, "I'm fine, thank you." I put the bread on the shelf, and turned to ask who he was, introduce myself, and he was gone. I was only turned for a few seconds, so there's no way he could have left my line of sight without me seeing some part of him leaving, and I never heard any doors open or close to indicate that he left or went elsewhere in the store. I told my mom when I got home because I was like, what if someone broke in? Do I want to work at a place where people can just easily waltz in undetected? She asked me about it. I told her it was weird because he was just standing there looking at a covered up cold case, so he couldn't see what was actually in it, and he didn't seem like he was trying to steal anything. She told me it was probably just the owner. I met the owner a few days later. He was not the man that I saw there a few nights prior. It wasn't anyone that worked there. I had heard from coworkers that the owner was still working there because his son that was supposed to take over the business had died of cancer. That night after work I went home and looked up the son's obituary online, and I shit you not, it was the guy I saw in the store. When I was younger I saw the same thing. I was in Bellingham, Washington, and my brother and an older family friend all saw it. We were just outside looking at the stars. We were visiting from a foggy area and never got to see a clear sky like that. It was incredible, and it seemed like the satellites were hanging out up there forever. They eventually got into a straight line and disappeared as well. I'll never forget it. Sleep paralysis is definitely creepy. I used to get them a lot in my teens when I slept on my back. I'm a side sleeper. The weight upon my chest would be just enough weight to wake me in a paralysis state. I would consistently have them almost every day at one point. One day I woke, which for those of us who knows the feeling of 1,000 pounds on our chest and unable to move, and watched my bedroom door slowly open like someone was peeping in on me. I wanted to cry for help thinking someone was coming in, but rather than seeing a person I watched this really creepy black silhouette of a person instead. It watched me for a good minute, then it closed the door. I then fell asleep. It turns out that silhouette was my brother trying to wake me up. I did some research and concluded that maybe the part of our brain that recognizes facial features was probably inactive and in sleep mode. Which was the reason why I saw a blank face. I still remember the vivid image of a no-faced man staring at me till this day. My teacher in high school told me he got a ride from John Wayne Gacy when he was a kid. My teacher and his friend were hitchhiking and dude pulled up butt-ass naked. They thought it was weird but they needed a ride because they were ditching school. He drove right past their exit and the next one, so my teacher and his friend started attacking him and he let them out. Years later when he was on the news, my teacher recognized him instantly.
Hey guys, do you ever have a problem getting to sleep at night? Well, I've got the magic pill to cure your insomnia. Much like you, I used to twist and turn all night. But then I discovered that you can take melatonin and Valerian Root together to get a good night's sleep every single night. I've been taking it every night by for years and years. I've been taking Valerian and melatonin, and this is my life hack to get a good night's sleep and vivid dreams every night. So be sure to click my affiliate links, and I will give you the gift of a good night's sleep.